Hello and welcome to Business Africa, your most authoritative business program in Africa. I am Afolake Oyinloye. The top stories this week. Egyptian central bank floats local pound as it hopes for IMF deal. Ivory Coast 2015-2016 cocoa season products exports down. And South African distiller exploits growing demand for whisky. Donald J. Trump elected 45th President of the United States of America on Tuesday. What will this translate to? Questions are hovering in regard to what his economic legacy would be for Africa and the rest of the world. We will be analyzing and making highlights on this on the next edition of Business Africa. Now let's have a look in Egypt. The country aims to finalize a multi-billion-dollar IMF deal within days after floating the Egyptian pound. The country's central bank has been rationing dollars and imposing strict capital controls while maintaining the pound at an artificially strong rate. Now, it's been hampering trade in the country that relies on imports on everything from cars to food. This move is expected to rebalance the currency's market after several weeks of turbulence. Now, let's hear more from Michael Debe and Louis Rodrigue.
Egypt has floated its currency in a move that has reduced its value by almost 50% against the US dollar. The North African country also devalued its currency by 48%, meeting an important demand set by the International Monetary Fund over 3 years to overhaul the country's economy. The country's central bank governor says the measure is historic. This is the first time it is happening to an Egyptian economy, and this is intended to correct the way in which our economy and financial situation is managed. Egypt's central bank increased interest rates by the percent to rebalance currency markets following weeks of turbulence. The IMF's executive board is yet to ratify the $12 billion loan provisionally agreed by Egypt and the IMF in August. The director of an exchange office in Cairo says the decision is a good one. I will bring stability to the market instead of speculation on the foreign currencies, on the daily price for those who speculate on the black market. Now, this will only be when allowed. For those who have dollars, they will be able to sell them at a reasonable price to the bank or the bank in a foreign exchange office. Although the liberalization should help the country to strengthen its economy, it will make life harder for Egyptians and the cost of all imported goods will rise sharply.
We're being joined by an economist, Alikan Sancho, on the line from Kenya to discuss more on this issue. Mr. Sancho, welcome to the program. Egypt has just devalued its currency and has now allowed the pound trade freely on the market. What led to this decision?
You know, post the Arab Spring in 2011, Egypt's tourism has fallen off a cliff. Foreign exchange earnings similarly were not there. They've drawn down on reserves. They were relying on the kindness of strangers like Saudi Arabia and the GCC. But the amount required had become just too big. It's a little bit like King Canute. They couldn't stop the tide. And one of the conditions of the biggest IMF package, I think, seen in Africa, which is $12 billion, was that they had to devalue the currency and essentially take out the arbitrage between the official and the unofficial rate. And I think, you know, what Egypt has done is something that's going to be done all over Africa. The next penny to drop is going to be Nigeria, where the president is doing a similar thing but will have to capitulate. So Egypt did have done the right thing in my view. It was the only thing they could do. But the problem is it's going to create tremendous stress in the street because, you know, this kind of devaluation, nearly 100%, is going to increase the prices of basic foodstuffs and put tremendous pressure on the Egyptian poor. And I think Egypt must be looking at trying to put some kind of program in place because otherwise it puts the regime into peril, I think.
Following the devaluation, we've seen the pound tumble against the US dollars. Now, what should ordinary Egyptians expect in the coming days?
Well, what is clear that when you get a devaluation of this nature, and particularly if you're a net importer, you're going to see an enormous spike in prices. Basic foodstuffs, are going to increase in price very, very dramatically, and we're going to see price increases across the board. So the challenge really is how is the government going to assist those people at the very bottom of the pyramid who really will find it extremely difficult to deal with the price increase. So it's going to be a very tricky point. It's like a laboratory experiment, given the scale of the move we've seen on the FX market. It is the right thing, but near term it's going to cause a lot of disruption and volatility.
Well, thanks for sharing. Ivory Coast, the world's major cocoa producer and exporter, recorded a deficit at the start of the season on October 1st, whilst local grinders struggled to procure supplies for the processing facilities. Kenneth Karori and William Bahia explain further.
Cocoa arrivals at ports in the world's top grower Ivory Coast reached around 252,000 tons in the first week of November, since the start of the season on October 1st. Cocoa exporters say this is lower by about 30% from 362,000 tons that was delivered the same period in the previous season. Exporters estimated that 21,000 tons of beans were delivered to port in the West African state's commercial port of Abidjan and 20,000 tons in the southern city of San Pedro, for a total of 41,000 tons from October 31st to November 6th, down from 60,000 tons in the same period last season. Ivory Coast exported some 1.5 million tons of cocoa in the 2015-2016 season, down from 1.6 million tons the previous season. Earlier in the year, the West African nation's Agriculture Ministry projected a deficit of 200,000 tons in production of the commodity this year, and which they blamed on poor weather that had hit the region. Agricultural specialists cited the persistence of the El Nino weather phenomenon that had brought in the region the most severe Harmattan winds in 3 decades. The sector was further hit mid this year by a caterpillar invasion, which destroyed large plantations of cocoa in the country's southeast. Cocoa is Ivory Coast's biggest cash crop, accounting for 22% of its gross domestic product, more than half of its exports, and 2/3 of people's jobs and incomes, according to the World Bank. Recently, Ivory Coast government increased cocoa prices by about 10% in a bid to spur more production by farmers.
Renowned for its wine production, South Africa is now getting more recognition for its whiskies and even looks to set challenge the dominance of Scottish and Irish brands by appealing connoisseurs. Claire Muthunji and Abilanga have more.
South Africa, a country famous for its wine industry, is also making headway in the global whiskey scene. In the picturesque Bainskloof Mountains in the coastal city of Cape Town is James Sedgwick Distillery, which has been operational for over 30 years. Its trademark brand is Bain's Cape Mountain Whiskey, a double-matured whiskey made from 100% South African yellow maize. The whiskey is matured in casks for 3 years, then transferred to another set of casks for between 18 to 30 months to obtain its distinct flavor.
We are the only commercial whiskey distillery on the continent of Africa. There are a few people who make whiskey on a very small scale, but not on the commercial scale which we do. So, back in 1977, when we started making whiskey, we didn't realize at that stage that we would grow to where we are now.
The award-winning tipple is sold locally, where a 750 ml bottle retails for about $20 and is also marketed in various countries abroad.
The person that likes the Irish whiskey prefers a grain whiskey, but also compares a lot of Grant's whiskey. So if you take in consideration on the pricing, the Bain's whiskey outsells Grant's by far, even though the price is much higher. It's a superior product.
Luxury funds are targeting the burgeoning ranks of what South African retailers call black diamonds or affluent African professionals. Data indicates that in 2014, whiskey climbed to more than 40% of spirit sales in the country, capturing most of the premium market.
And with that, we've come to the end of this week's edition. Thanks for watching. Get interactive via our social media platforms, both in English and French. Join us again same time next week.